With this video, I'd like to discuss a few important ideas that you should be thinking about when you first start actually doing some programming in VBA. I want you to notice on the screen right here, I've got some cell locations highlighted. You can see those 4 highlights. And then next to each one, I've got this label called cells with parentheses, and inside the parentheses you see the row addresses listed in a row column format with just numbers. That's going to turn out to be very important as we access the spreadsheet cells from our VBA code. We'll be able to refer to any cell on the spreadsheet by simply using the row and column number rather than an address. We will be able to use addresses also, but as it turns out, using the row and column number saves a lot of effort, and I really want people to be thinking about that. So I'm going to flip over to the Visual Basic editor and talk about a little piece of code. This is a pretty simple little piece of code. Before I go any further, though, I'll just mention that I inserted a new module that you can see over here. I renamed the module 1 that was there with the different name, again, just to highlight that this is my code. It's not in a sheet, it's not in the workbook, it's in a new module. And of course, we insert a new module by using the insert menu and specifying a new module. Now, the next thing, again, I indicated that I really always wanted to have the option explicit statement at the top of your code. So if you don't have that, you can just type it as you see here, or of course under the Tools Options menu you can tick that little box right there that says Require Variable Declaration, and that'll take care of that. And you'll get that every time then on your computer. The next thing that is fairly obvious here, but it's something that you need to think of, and a lot of people don't when they first start out, is the code you see with the apostrophe starting the line. These are simply comments. These lines with the little apostrophe are completely ignored by the environment, and they are not part of your program other than the fact that they provide documentation. You'll notice that I can add one of these comments at the end of a statement line. So if I want to but if I want to describe what the statement's doing, then I can put a comment out here on the end of the line. So generally, it's a good idea to put your name at the top and a brief comment about what the code is doing. The next thing we see here is a simple subroutine. Now you can ignore the different colors you see here. I just did that to make things kind of stand out. In fact, the words you see with the yellow background, red text, those are reserved words. Those are words you cannot use as names for variables or sub-procedures. Those are words that are part of the language. The words that you see with the gray background, those are all names that have been given to various procedures or variables. Some of the procedures may be built in, as you notice down here. The message box procedure is built in. That's actually a function. And cells acts in a similar fashion. Those are all names for things. We would refer to those as identifiers. They identify something. So the identifier main identifies this subroutine. The next thing I want you to notice is that in the body of the code, I did do one tab indent for each statement in the body of the code. Doing indents like this is going to become critical. The author of the online course that we're using was not always doing the best formatting for his code, and you should get in the habit of using correct formatting for your code. So a one-stop indent at the beginning of your statements. Now when we get into things like for loops and while loops and if-else statements, we'll indent the body of those structures also. But since we don't have any of those here, one indent is appropriate. Now the next thing is this first statement that we see here that I have highlighted. This statement is declaring a variable, the dim keyword indicates that you're declaring a variable, a place where you're going to hold values inside the computer's memory. And so the word following dim is simply the name of my variable so that we refer to that memory location. And following that, we specify the type of the variable with the as keyword and the type integer in this case, which is a whole number. Now, again, it is not absolutely required that you declare variables before you use them. It is a very important habit to get into, though. So this requires some additional typing, and some people kind of think, why do I have to do this when it's not required? This is just part of the programming discipline in VBA. It does catch some problems and errors so that you won't have that difficulty when you write your code. So when you want to use a variable in your program, like you see here, I used the variable sum. I assigned a value 1 to that variable so it's stored in the computer's memory. Well, I wanted to use that variable, so I declared that variable up above. The assignment statement that you see here basically takes whatever expression or value you have on the right-hand side of that equals symbol and stores it into the memory location on the left-hand side. Now this seems backwards to many people, kind of like you should take the value you want to store and it should go from left to right. Well, that's not the way most programming languages work. The value on the right-hand side is stored into the memory location named on the left-hand side. So this second statement just demonstrates another example of doing that. The 99 is now stored into that memory location, and whatever was in the memory location just is overwritten and no longer exists. The next statement down here is a little bit more complex. You'll notice on the right-hand side we have the use of the variable name. Now, anytime a variable is used on the right-hand side of the assignment operation, you do a retrieval. So it goes out to the memory location called sum, grabs the value, in this case it's going to grab the value 99, then adds it to 1, and that results in 100, of course. And so what you see highlighted in blue here, this would be the expression. The value of that expression, 100, would then be stored into that memory location on the left-hand side. So that's fairly straightforward, but it does require you to kind of slow down and think about what's happening. First we do a retrieval, then we do the addition, and then finally we do the assignment to that memory location on the left-hand side. Now this next statement is very simple. It's using the message box to display the value that's inside that memory location. Now since sum in that case is not on the left-hand side of an assignment, it means it's going to do a retrieval. So it's going to go retrieve that value, and then the message box function will display it in a little dialog box on the screen. And so the question then is, well, what gets displayed? You know, if you can follow these statements step by step by step, then you should be able to easily describe what gets displayed right there. The next message box is again another simple one. All it does, as you'll notice in this case, is display this string of characters. A string of characters in Visual Basic for applications is indicated with the double quote marks, as you'll notice there on that string. Generally just called quotation marks. The single quote marks, as some people call them, are really called apostrophes. Don't get them confused. In VBA, you have to use the quotation marks for strings of characters like you see here. So the message box statement just pops up that string on the screen, and the user clicks OK to continue. The next thing you'll notice is that I'm actually using one of my cells opportunities here. I'm saying cells 1, 1, and notice it's plural with the S. That says essentially go to the cell in row 1, column 1, and it's using the assignment operation right here. And it says assign this value that's on the right-hand side. That's the value. And it says assign it to this location indicated on the left-hand side. So as you can see, it's very easy to assign a value within your VBA program to one of the cells on your spreadsheet. You just say cells with parentheses and then separate the row and the column with the comma. This last statement is a little bit fancier, but not a whole bunch. But again, it's using message box. This time we display that literal string of characters. Again, you can notice the quotation marks. And then I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm using the ampersand character that you see here as a string concatenation operator. What that means is it's going to concatenate or glue together the string on the left with whatever the value is that's in the cell at location 16, 3. So using cells 16 row, 13 the column, we can actually retrieve the value that's stored in that cell on the spreadsheet. Now, unless you remember what was on that spreadsheet cell or in that spreadsheet cell, you probably could not predict this. But we could easily enough go back and look at our sheet and look at row 16, 13. So down here, there's our cells 16, 13, and the value that's in that cell you see is 45.67. So what that means is when this message box statement executes, it should display this text with the number 4567 afterwards, hopefully with a $sign on it too, because that's what we saw in the cell. Now, again, I want to reiterate, because this is not on the left-hand side of an assignment operation like you see here, it's a retrieval. It acts just exactly like a variable. Just like a variable like the one we declared up here. If it's on the right-hand side, it's a retrieval from the computer's memory. If it's on the left-hand side, it's a storage. So since this is not on the left-hand side of an assignment operation, it goes to retrieve the value that's in that memory location. And that memory location happens to be a location on our sheet. And we can actually see that memory location right there. So when I run this then, we should be able to predict what it's going to do. It comes down and puts the 1 in the memory location sum, then overwrites the 1 with a 99, then retrieves the 99 and adds it to a 1 and stores that back into the memory location sum. Then it simply displays what that value is by retrieving it from the memory location. Then we have another message box that just says click OK to continue. Then we have an assignment statement that should change cell location 1 on the sheet, and we can actually watch that happen when we run the program. And then finally we just have a message box that displays what's in the cell at location row 16, column 13. So let's go ahead and run this. Now again, to run a sub, the easiest way to do it is to simply make sure your cursor is inside the subroutine somewhere. So I'm just going to place my cursor up here at the top of the subroutine, inside the subroutine. And then I'm going to hit the little green arrow that says run that subroutine. So let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. So it displayed the value 100. That's what we expected, 99 plus 1, of course. Notice I kind of cheated because the word magic was already in the cell. So we're going to have to run this a second time and see if it actually does that, because it's already there. You know, you're kind of like, oh, you were just lying to me. It's already there. I didn't put it there. All right, let's keep going. Click OK. It says click OK to continue. Click OK. And it says display a cell, 4567. Notice it did not display the formatting from the cell because the cell contents happens to be 45.67. The $sign is simply the formatting on that cell. So it did not actually show us that. The word magic is there though. Let's click OK. And that's the end of that sub. Let's go back to the sheet and let's just change this word magic to something else. Okay, I'll put my name there. So now my name is sitting there. Now, one thing that I often will do, I'll screw up and I'll say, okay, I want to put something into the spreadsheet cell to test it out. And then I say, I want to get back over to Visual Basic. Well, because I'm editing in this cell, I can't get back over to Visual Basic easily. Now, if I used a different technique to get over to Visual Basic by like clicking on my taskbar, then I'm in Visual Basic and I'm going to want to run this, and let's see if I can hit the run button. And notice it doesn't run it. And I'm very frustrated by this. I'm like, Visual Basic's broken. And again, though, as you saw, the problem was I actually was in the middle of editing this cell, so I need to hit enter on that cell so it's no longer editing. Now I can click the Visual Basic button, make sure my cursor is in the body of the sub somewhere, and then hit the go button here. So this time notice it says Peter in that cell, and then we got the 100. Click continue. Okay, click OK to continue. Now when I click this button, it's going to display what's in cell 1613. And you can watch over here in cell row 1, column 1, which is A1, of course, and see if it changes. And there it did. Change to magic. Displays the 4567, and that's pretty much what you'd expect. So all of these things I discussed are things that you need to know and you need to remember, and if you need to watch this video more than once. Also, you could type in this code. I would suggest that's a good idea. Type in the code that you see here and run it and see what happens. What would happen if you didn't have any values out on the sheet and you say display what's in this location, let's say, and it doesn't have anything there, you won't see anything when it runs. Now another thing you could do is you could change these values right here, or change the values right here and place magic in a different cell, or you could retrieve a different cell. One thing you could try is put 2, 2 right here and put 2, 2 right here and see what happens. Maybe try to predict what's going to happen before you run it. So give that a shot, and please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever about anything you're doing with this.